If you've watched any of my trick tutorial videos before, you probably know that by the end of the video, I usually put you in a situation where you're making a really small leap in skill from doing something that you already know how to do to finally landing the full trick. Well, that's not by accident. And today I'm going to show you how you can build up a training program for any trick that'll get you from where you are to where you want to be every time. Now, it's not a big secret that the difference between where you are right now and where you want to be is just a matter of knowing how to get there and then dedicating the time necessary to complete that journey. But a lot of people don't understand that learning a lot of skateboarding tricks isn't a completely binary process. So if you want to learn how to do a new skateboarding trick, let's just take ollies as an example. You don't just one day click over to miraculously being able to land ollies every time you try it. But that's exactly how we have a tendency to practice these tricks. Just starting out going for the full maneuver every time, failing over and over and over again, and then just keeping our fingers crossed hoping that one day something changes and we're able to do it. Alright, so looking back at our example of the ollie, rather than looking at your ability to do one as a matter of one of two possibilities, either you can or you can't, instead try to look at it as a combination of multiple skills that you need to learn and practice independently one at a time that you can eventually combine into being able to do a full ollie, and then try to pinpoint where you are along that spectrum. So for an ollie, when you started learning, hopefully you at least did a little bit of research to find out what all goes into being able to do an ollie. If not, you're going to have a hard time breaking down the trick into its components, so I'd actually recommend doing that first for every new trick that you want to learn. But yeah, so for an ollie, first you have to crouch down by bending at your knees, and then you have to jump into the air while pushing the back of the board down with your back foot. Then you have to slide your front foot up the grip tape by bending at your ankle. Then you have to pull your back foot up to allow the board to level out. And then finally you have to land on the board with both feet without chickening out and taking one of your feet off so you can land with it safely on the ground. So once you know and understand what all is supposed to be happening during the trick, now you can go through each step one by one and see if you're doing it properly already. Then once you come across a step that you're having a little bit of trouble with, find a way to isolate that skill and be able to practice it independently without having to complete the rest of the trick. Now, one thing that can really help you with this if you're having a little bit of trouble is you can just grab your cell phone and make a quick little video of you trying the trick and then watch it back, preferably in slow motion, and see if you can pinpoint something that you're not quite doing correctly every time. So as an example, if it looks like you're having trouble getting your body up into the air high enough, you can just practice the jumping part of the ollie by itself. Either just do a few practice jumps on flat ground in between each of your ollie attempts, or you can even practice doing it while you're standing on the skateboard in ollie position so that you can teach yourself how to do it and program that into your muscle memory. The important thing here is that you want to try to practice the skill in isolation from the rest of the trick, so whenever you jump into the air, make sure you do so with the express intent of not trying to land back on the board on your way back down. So just tell yourself that you're going to stand on the board and then jump up and then bail out of the trick completely, making sure at least one of your feet is off of the board when you land back on the ground, and just focus on improving the exact skill that you want to learn. Now, it might sound like a lot of work up front, but it's actually going to ultimately save you a whole bunch of time because you're going to prevent yourself from just wasting time trying to do the full trick over and over again without any improvement. A lot of skateboard tricks are really complicated maneuvers that most of the time involve performing many specific actions all in quick succession, some of them even overlapping, so you don't have time to think about doing each action as the trick is taking place. That is where your muscle memory and your subconscious kicks into effect. Once you learn a skill in isolation, the next time you try the full trick, you can just tell your subconscious mind to run that program in the background, and that'll free up your conscious mind to be able to focus on the next thing that you might not have down yet. Alright, so just to give you some more concrete examples, let me list out some of the practice steps that I've created for people over the years to help them get past a specific sticking point they were having. For a kickflip, if you're having trouble committing to landing with both of your feet on the board after the board is flipping around under you, you can just practice the landing part by flipping the board with your hand instead, landing on the board with both feet, and getting used to the feeling of committing both of your feet to being on the board after it's done flipping. Then once you go back to trying your kickflips, when you go to try to land back on the board, just remember that you already know how to keep your feet over the board and land on it once it's done flipping. For a pop shove it, if you're having trouble getting the board to rotate properly when you pop the trick, you can practice just the scoop with your back foot by taking your front foot off the board and then just getting the board to rotate around with your back foot. With this trick, you can practice the landing part even easier than with a kickflip because you can get the board to do its rotation with just your feet and then still land back on it normally. For a drop-in, if you're having trouble committing to setting your front wheels down on the quarter pipe, you can practice doing just that part on progressively steeper obstacles, starting with something that you can already easily do. So maybe that's just setting your front wheels down on flat ground or on a really shallow ramp, and then working your way up slowly, going steeper and steeper until you're able to do it on the quarter pipe. Now, another little trick that you can use that comes in handy with a lot of skateboarding maneuvers is finding a way to introduce some kind of a safety net into the trick so that you can try it out and see what it feels like without having to overcome the sensation of fear that goes along with having to fall and possibly get hurt if things don't quite work out. So for instance, for something like the drop-in, if you can invent a way for you to be able to mess up and still know that you're not going to fall, you can finally start to get an understanding for how far forward you need to lean and how much weight you need to put on your front foot when you're stomping the front wheels down on the ramp. One technique that I've seen people use is they'll find someone that's at least as big as they are, and they'll have them stand next to them while they're dropping in, and you'll basically hold one hand in each of the other person's hands, and whenever you drop in, if the person that's dropping in starts to fall, they can basically pull up and keep the person from falling too hard, and that way you can commit to setting your front wheels down on the ramp with as much force as you need to, and that way you'll know for sure that you can fall without it causing too much damage. I've even seen another guy go as far as to tying a big rope to a branch on top of his mini ramp, and then he was holding the rope as he was dropping in. That way if he started to fall, he could just pull up on the rope and prevent himself from hitting his head on the bottom of the ramp. So sometimes you do have to get a little creative with it, but most of the time it's just as simple as buying a helmet and some pads and then learning how to fall with the pads on. Alright, so on to the next example. So for a trick like the rock and roll, if you're having trouble bringing the board back in after you rock the front wheels over the coping, you could do something like this to isolate that part of the maneuver by tapping your front wheels on a shallower flat ramp or on the same quarter pipe but just underneath the coping, and then rotating and riding back down. And finally, if you're practicing board slides and your board keeps flying out from under you at the end, you could isolate just that last part of the slide by placing your board at the end of a ledge and then running and jumping on it and just focusing on keeping your feet on it long enough to make the wheels touch down on the ground. It doesn't even matter if you fall while you're doing it. You just want to get your body used to the feeling of staying on the board while it slides off the end of the ledge and then touching the wheels down on the ground. In fact, one of the most common things I end up having to tell people when they're learning something new is that they should just get to the part at the end of the trick where you're setting your wheels down, go ahead and stomp your wheels down on the ground and then fall on purpose. It sounds weird, but whenever you're trying to learn a new trick, sometimes you can build up this like highly irrational fear in your head of what's going to happen if you might fall at the end. And so you get to the point where no matter what, every time you're flicking the trick and everything's looking perfect and your brain shortcuts you and says, hey, let's get out of here because I don't know what's going to happen if I fall. And so basically every time you bail out of the trick without even getting to the end part, even though nothing really went wrong, causing you to have to bail out. So one thing you can do is if you just go ahead and get it out of the way, get the fall out of the way, you can show your brain that the fall doesn't really hurt that bad. You can get that out of the way and then you can unlock being able to commit to the trick in the future. Now I just wanted to add a little side note here. If you're not comfortable with the fact that you might fall while you're trying a particular trick, that trick might be a little bit beyond your skill level. One of the most important components of being able to do every trick that you might not have considered before, and it's the first part of every trick, it's developing the ability to fall while you're doing it, or at least being able to bail out of the trick without getting hurt. So once you can do that, just keep kicking the trick around and work your way closer and closer to where you feel confident enough to land on the board with both feet and then roll away. You already know that if things don't work out, you can fall and it won't be the end of the world, so just keep reminding yourself of that fact and get that first full commit out of the way before it becomes a way bigger deal than it needs to be. Alright guys, I hope that gave you a little bit of insight into a new way you can learn your skateboard tricks. Let me know in the comments what trick you're working on and we'll put our heads together and see if we can come up with a practice step or a stepping stone trick that'll help you get from where you are to being able to land the trick altogether. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great day and remember, never stop improving.